In the Wake. 3 weekends ago, I was centered in Wichita, Kansas, on the flat, regular, 1 square mile by mile, 90-degree intersections. Nothing particularly interesting happens in the heartland, at least. Nobody says anything interesting. Crops grow, dry out, are cut down, replanted the following spring. Cicadas scream like there's nothing better to do. They're probably right. But that's where Opa wanted to be. He wanted to stay on his farm just north of the interstate until he died. He got his wish. Every year, or every few as far as I could tell, since that was my cadence of visiting before there wasn't a reason to anymore, another field of dusty wheat or fuzzy, lumpy soybeans was replaced by a pre-planned, quickly manufactured set of self-same houses with a well-landscaped turn off the unbent main roads into an eddied neighborhood with a name sliced from every other little Americana town like Bel Air or Deer Run. Sooner, but probably later, his farm will be surrounded and leveled and turned into Plainsview Villas or Quiet Orchard. And so many middling, small families who don't really want to be there will move in. The service was pleasant. Held in the church he attended, more than 100 people showed up. I didn't know any of them. They knew who I, my brother, and my sister must have been, surely. The building was a metal-frame, semi-mega church, the kind that are large but economical enough not to seem hypocritically opulent. Us kids reflected that it would be nice to think that 100 people in their not-quite-Sunday best would shuttle between air conditioning, under almost 100 degrees, in Kansas September, just to see us off. We don't really belong to any sort of community like that. I imagine most of the congregation saw them every Sunday, then maybe just Oma, then neither. The pastor keeping them in their prayers and reminding everyone that they would like to be here, but can't. My father and uncle gave speeches. The pastor introduced them with each other's names, but there was no hiccup to accentuate the faux pas. Everything continued on. They talked about his work ethic, how he achieved the American dream. He fit the image perfectly. Arrived from war-torn Germany in the 40s, worked for the USAF and Boeing as an engineer, loved his family. A poem, When Tomorrow Starts Without Me, one that's so neat and orderly with an A-B-C-B rhyme scheme, read by a member of the church. There was stale coffee and Spartan traveler carafes, the congregation fulfilling their tribute, the motions uncomfortable and solemn. Acknowledgement, similar to a climber passing a bright landmark that was once also a climber. Different ways to say the same thing when there's not really anything to say, but you need to fill the air with some nicety. And pictures, and remember whens, and quick smiles with a trace back to friend of friends and cousins and second-degree relations. It's slightly miserable and reassuring. Then, we go back home as the closest first-degree relatives that hold some heightened regard even though we were not there for the day-in, day-out realities. Opa's workshop is crowded and efficient. Nothing ever seemed to end up thrown away unless already collected, categorized, containered, and finally, when any hope of utility was unable to be conjured up, sorted and placed in ever closer to the trash pile real estate. Dozens of Folgers canisters are lined up floor to ceiling containing nails, screws, fasteners. Another wall completely stocked with reused jam jars of washers, nuts, anything metal and or machined. The white walls are barely noticeable behind tools held in perfect order by pin nails like desiccated insects behind glass. Motor oil vapors soaked into sawdust and slowly released, the cycle of damp, dry, whipping up a stale vegetal musk. I love that scent. It hangs around humbly productive self-sufficiency. Above, there's a muted scraping squeak of a rusty whirlybird lazily pulling fresh air through the attic and around all the boards, rough sawn, that were going to be something someday. Maybe not anymore. In the back, there's a wood stove Opa, or, in a character-building exercise, his kids, would keep going all night to warm the greenhouse throughout the winters that Midwesterners know are the antonyms of the brutal Kansas summers, alike in intensity, obverse in temperature. Beside it is a barely opened 24 case of Dr. Pepper Zero with only one can removed. The purchaser likely overlooked the zero, since Opa only liked them sugared. No fewer than 5 chainsaws, one electric, are on the next table in the back. The trees on the property are getting too old to hold themselves up, and their ancient, burled husks put up a raging fight. Everything has a purpose. Everything has a place. My Oma is frail. More so each time I see her. On this visit, she said, "Oh, how did I end up in Kansas of all places?" I had no idea she didn't like it there. It's a regrettable kind of dedication to my Opa that she stayed till the end. When he could barely move, and the bed transfer device was too large and heavy and clunky and difficult to use. When he would start in English, then switch to German, and couldn't switch back again. When he started to forget. I had no idea. I never asked if she liked it there. I never really asked what happened on that little farm. I never knew exactly what happened to my never-met Aunt Kathy, just that the smoking got her and she died of a heart attack before I was born. I don't know what it was like for Opa growing up. I'm told he didn't like to talk about it, and I was always too meek to ask. It seems so silly to say. There's no good time to bring it up. I always say I'd rather not really be remembered. I'd like to think that before I'm too immobile to get off the track of the slow steam engine groaning and thrashing and finally coming to a slightly undignified rest at the station, that some transcendent feeling of completeness would wash over me, and I'd have a sudden, tragic, and according to my life insurance, completely accidental life-ending event that would be slightly comical after the shock wore off. I'd like to think that I'd have control of that. It seems more realistic that it'll come far too early, in some stupid accident, or that my fear of the end will override my fear of the slow pull of the brake, and I won't have the heroic and gallant exit pursued by Bear. I wrote this in October 2025 and only recently reread it. It seemed like I was looking down on how ordinary the whole thing was, but despite all the depressing and bleak aspects, I actually found it all very comforting and attainable, as if you didn't really need to go out searching for acceptance and belonging. It's all still there just waiting for you, and you can come back and visit any time, and they will all be right there, exactly as you remember.